Maybe you could start with an introduction to Young Plato, and what can people expect if they watch your film?
So Young Plato is a film set in Ardoyne in North Belfast. It's about a maverick headmaster who 10 years ago introduced philosophy as a core subject for primary school children from the ages of 4 to 11. And in the film, you follow the stories of about four individuals, four boys, and you see all the hurdles that they have to overcome and how they use critical thinking philosophy to overcome those problems.
Mm. And, where did this project first begin? I mean, how did you discover Kevin? And, I guess, jump through any of the hoops you had to be able to get a camera in the classroom, work with the kids. I mean, it must have been quite a process to both approach him and get the filming done, but then of course make that into a narrative film as well.
The idea came from Declan McGrath, who's my co-director, and he is a Belfast filmmaker. He grew up in North Belfast. So a friend of his told him about Kevin McArevey. And then Declan, we had worked together before. He worked as an editor on some of my previous projects. And he knew that I had just finished making a film in a boarding school, a primary boarding school called School Life, where we embedded ourselves in the school for 2 years and filmed observationally. So that's why he came to me and asked me to get involved. And so then, of course, we went to Kevin, the headmaster of the school, and we had a template, like we had a film that we could show and say, look, this is the kind of thing we're thinking of, because it's very difficult for people to understand what observational filming is and how much it evolves, because it requires a lot of time. Declan and I would have spent the guts of 1.5 years embedded in the school. We had our own office in the school where we would retreat when we weren't filming, and we'd continue working on the film. So we were around all the time. How did we go about getting access? Well, once we had Kevin on board, and then we got the board on board, they were the key people. And then really the community, the Ardoyne community, they have massive respect for Kevin and his staff and what the school have done for their children over the years. So we sort of piggybacked on that respect. And I think because they said we were okay, then the parents pretty much accepted us. I mean, yes, we did talk to them all. We explained to them what we were going to do. I gave them access to School Life if they wanted to have a look. I gave them our phone numbers if they needed to talk to us individually, or if they had any questions they wanted to ask privately. And thankfully, most of them came on board. So that's really, like, you don't need everybody on board. You just need to know who's on board, because when you're filming observation, you just need to know who to avoid and who you can kind of follow. So then that was it, really. And then with some of the teachers, we talked to them individually as well. And again, like nobody was forced to take part. It was all based on whether they felt comfortable allowing us to go into, their classroom, it's a big ask. I mean, it's a sacred space, really, and to allow cameras to come in and watch them teaching, like that's a big thing. But once we kind of explained to them the process, that we were really interested in the philosophy and in the pastoral care, we weren't judging them as teachers or anything like that. It was like we had a specific storyline that we were following, and most of them understood that and came on board. So yeah, so that was really how it all started.
And when you're watching it, I mean, you almost wonder at some points if it's been scripted, because the children seem so articulate, seem to answer so thoughtfully. And Kevin, never seems to have kind of a dark or off moment. And I'm sure in the hours and hours of footage that you shot, there must have been some hiccups. But of course, and for what we see, it doesn't seem like there were any at all. So were there any real challenging moments, or what might have been some of the highlights of kind of being in the classroom and filming in this observational way?
I mean, well, the challenges were to be on the right child at the right time when they were speaking. I mean, those are the challenges. Like, you're wearing headphones, you hear a voice, you're kind of, you have no idea where the voice is coming from, you know. So the challenges were being on top of it and being there and capturing the moment. And of course, there were plenty of moments that we missed, and that's observational filmmaking. You just have to let it go and you have to move on. I never ask a child to perform. I never ask them to do anything for me, because I have learned with experience that you will never end up using that. I mean, what I am looking for as a filmmaker is authenticity and a truth. And yes, sometimes things happen. I just have to put that behind me and wait for the next time when something will happen. Some of the, I suppose, the challenges, yes. I mean, we had to be very careful with the stories that we chose to tell. I promised the parents from the very beginning that we would only show positive stories with positive arcs, because there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of social problems, difficult background, and there are a lot of children there that we could not tell their story. We couldn't film. So if that's what you mean, like, yes, those kind of issues happen, but as filmmakers, we have responsibility to be careful with what it is that we do show, and, you know, the characters that we did choose to follow in the end, like, they did have these really strong positive arcs, and we were able to show them. Yeah. But I think you get a sense from the film that there are darker things as well that happen, you know, that we can't control. And that's really important, because for, like, Kevin and his staff, they cannot control the environment the children go when they leave the school gates go into.
I guess that was going to be my next question is, you know, when you're making a film like this, when, of course, I mean, you do splice in some of the footage, you know, showing kind of like the historical background of the Troubles and what had gone on in the community. And there is kind of like on the periphery, you know, there's mention of the suicide rates, there's mention of, you know, drug pushers, there's mention, you know, from some of the kids of the, you know, a troubled family life. So it's just, you know, how did you want to try and balance those things? Because of course that's a very important context to put this school into. But what's amazing is then the school itself sort of emerges like a sanctuary, in this space of innocence and a space of positivity and optimism in what might otherwise seem like quite a dark place. So how did you want to balance those things, and what did you want people to take away from that?
Yes. Originally, our intention would have been to spend more time outside the school gates and in the community, so that we would be able to get some sort of sense of that. But we filmed the year of the academic year of 2019. So obviously everything shut down in March 2020 with COVID. So we had, after that, there was no access really to the community. It was illegal to go in and out of people's houses. Everybody had to stay in very strict pods. So that's how the whole archive thing came to being. We had to be able to give an idea of the context of the film. So I mean, the history classes, yes, they happen in the school, and we were very specific of, like, well, when you are going to be talking about, you know, the burnouts in '69, girls, that those were very defining moments in Ardoyne's history. And we were making this film for an international audience, so we wanted people to understand the context of, you know, of the intergenerational trauma that was there within that community. So those classes helped us do that. And then, you know, because, like, there was no marches and stuff that we could film because of COVID at that time, then we gathered all this archive footage, and it was our editor with this archival footage of, you know, what would have been unfolding in a normal year. And that was because the situation there is incredibly fragile, you know, just scratch beneath the surface, and and things kick off. And actually the year when we finished that the summer of 2021, when we finished, we were quite far into the edit, and we were quite finished. Trouble started bubbling again in parts of Ardoyne, in the unionist part of Ardoyne. There were 12-year-old kids out on the street protesting against the border down the Irish Sea. Now, we know that 12-year-old kids were not doing that, but they were being sent out there by the drug dealers to aggravate the situation again. And then they were going to the peace walls. They were trying to engage the Holy Cross kids in fighting by lopping things over the fences. So, the situation is constantly fragile, and that's what we wanted people to understand in the film. Right now, there may be peace, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to flip, in a couple of months' time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Kevin himself as kind of a subject for a documentary. I mean, I actually just spoke to him just before I'm speaking to you now. I mean, and I felt like I just had a philosophy lesson being in his presence. I mean, did he even astound you, just like how great he was just to listen to every day, and how he is brimming with this kind of patience and optimism when you think a lot of other people probably could feel helpless. And, and there are some hints as to, his own background. But also, it must feel frustrating at times that you're kind of educating kids and they're getting a completely different message, from the minute they walk in the door at home. So, what do you think is so special about Kevin? And did that astound you, like his attitude?
He's Kevin is a man on a mission. I mean, he really is. He's utterly passionate about philosophy. He really believes in the power of it. I think philosophy helped him turn his life around, and he's convinced that it will help the kids turn their life around. And he's already seen the fruits of that. I mean, those children that you saw in the history classes in P7, so they're in their final year in school there. They've been doing philosophy since the age of 4. So you can see like they're very, very bright, and they're very they can see the bigger picture, and they're not accepting the nationalist narrative that is probably reflected on every gable end in the houses that they live in the form of a mural of some sort. But Kevin is just, he is an inspiration, and he's an eternal optimist, and nothing seems to knock him down. And what I found extraordinary there were 2 things I found really extraordinary, was how he and his staff listened to the children. They gave them the space to speak, and they really listened. And I think the children then rise to the occasion. They become confident because they know that what they have to say will be heard. And they know one of their first lessons is there is no right or wrong answer, just express. But you don't have to stick to your opinion. You can change your thinking if somebody else's thinking makes more sense to you. And then the other thing that I learned was humor. Like that is how they deal with very, very real disturbing issues in that school all the time. There's always some drama unfolding, but the feeling in the school is that of happiness and a lot of joking and a lot of humor. And I think that's what kind of sustains them and gets them through the day, is the fact that they can have the crack, and they can, the slagging comes fast and furious, and it's there's something really lovely about that. The feeling and the optimism and the humor in the school kind of helps diffuse all the other stuff that's unfolding.
Kind of like every time his phone starts playing Elvis, this kind of encapsulates that idea, kind of breaks the tension, doesn't it? So what do you hope the impact of this film to be? Because I guess on the one hand, it's actually very educational for people who perhaps don't even know what the situation is in communities like that. And like you say, kind of shining a light on the reality that it is very precarious, and there is social deprivation, and there are social issues. But then on the other hand, there's kind of a universal message in there about having that optimism, having a positive attitude, instilling that in our kids, so that whatever they might face, whether that's, you know, kind of, we get a hint of, you know, the threat they face from social media. If we think about, you know, watching the news, what's going on in Ukraine, there's a positive attitude there that can help all of us.
In the age of fake news, misinformation, I hope that people will find inspiration in the film and will have a lot of hope as to what can be done or how we can prepare the next generation of children, and how, with given, you know, being taught critical thinking can help them navigate their way through all the rubbish that's out there, and that they can think for themselves, and then that they can ultimately make better choices. So we don't find ourselves in a situation where, you know, people are forced into, or people go and elect somebody that really doesn't have their best interests at heart, or, you know, get pulled into, you know, a war that really does nothing but cause pain and hardship. I mean, you know, I think if everybody had a Socratic circle to go to, or had, you know, a philosophy board to go to and figure out what it was that happened when they lost, you know, the run of their emotions, or had a jamboree to talk to, you know, I don't think we would be witnessing this awful situation that we're witnessing now in the Ukraine. So, you know, it's like Kevin wrote on the board, think, respond. And if we can teach that to the next generation, you know, I'm very hopeful where they might, you know, where they might bring us, as, you know, where they might bring the human race. It will be a lot better than this place that we find ourselves in now.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to start, because that's a really wonderful answer. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and I can't wait for everyone else to see this really eye-opening and heartwarming, you know, documentary. So thanks so much.
Oh, a pleasure, Sarah.